The gleaming spires of Nova City rose like crystal fingers against the purple sky. The Celestials had built their capital to show everyone how advanced they were. Soft blue light pulsed through the transparent buildings, matching the glow of the Celestial skin. They were beautiful aliens, tall, with perfect features and skin that shimmered like pearls. High Admiral Una stood at the window of the tallest tower, looking down at the city. Her silver-blue skin reflected the light as she frowned. Her long fingers tapped against the crystal railing. "They are coming tomorrow," she said. Director Quan looked up from his datapad. "The humans?" "Yes. The Earth ship will arrive in the morning." Yuma made a sound like bells tinkling, a celestial sign of disgust. "Why do we allow them at our summit? They are barely more than animals." The council chamber behind them was empty now, but tomorrow it would be filled with representatives from 30 advanced worlds. The Galactic Summit happened once every 10 years. It was when important decisions about trade, territory, and technology were made. "The laws say all spacefaring species may attend," Quan reminded her, "even ones as undeveloped as humans." Una turned from the window. She was the most powerful celestial in the galaxy. For 300 years, she had led her people to greater and greater achievements. The Celestials lived for nearly 1,000 years, and they used that time to perfect themselves. They had eliminated disease, hunger, and most emotions they considered primitive. They were, in their own minds, perfect. "Show me the human data again," she ordered. Quan projected a hologram in the center of the room. Images of humans appeared, pink, brown, and tan creatures with asymmetrical features and imperfect bodies. Data scrolled beside the images. Average lifespan, 80 years. Susceptible to thousands of diseases. Driven by emotions like fear, anger, and love. Inefficient biological systems. They still eat food instead of absorbing energy directly. Una walked around the display, her shimmering robes flowing behind her. "And they think they can contribute to galactic politics. They barely understand how their own bodies work." "They are resilient," Quan noted. "They survived 3 global wars and still managed to develop space travel. Like cockroaches survive a nuclear blast," Una said. "Being hard to kill is not the same as being advanced." A soft chime sounded, and another celestial entered the chamber. This was Min, the youngest member of the High Council, at only 120 years old. She bowed respectfully. "The preparations for the summit are complete, High Admiral. The delegates' quarters are ready." "Where have you placed the humans?" Una asked. Min displayed a map of the accommodation towers. "In the 5th tower, lower level, far from the important delegates, as you requested." "Good. And their meeting access?" "Limited to open sessions only. They won't be permitted in any of the advanced technology discussions or resource allocation meetings." Una nodded with approval. The celestial hierarchy of species was well established. Class 1 were the Celestials themselves. Class 2 included the highly advanced silicon-based life forms from Rigel. Class 3 were the telepathic cloud beings of Altair. And so on down the line. Humans were Class 5, barely above the primitive insectoid species that had just discovered how to leave their own solar system. They had nothing to offer the advanced worlds. "What do they want?" Una asked. "Why do they insist on coming to these summits?" Quan reviewed his notes. "They seek technology sharing, particularly medical advancements, and they want to be included in the resource rights for the Orion Arm." Una laughed. "The sound like crystal bells. They think we would share our medical technology with them. They would only misuse it." "Their representative this year is different," Min said. "Not a politician or military leader. He's a scientist. Dr. Tahan." A new image appeared in the hologram, a human male with calm eyes and a serious expression. He wore simple clothes, not the gaudy uniforms humans usually preferred. "What does he study?" Una asked, mildly curious. "Xenobiology and comparative cultural systems," Min replied. "He speaks 12 Earth languages and has written papers on celestial biology. Yuna raised a perfect eyebrow. He studies us. How presumptuous. He might be more interesting than the usual humans, Quan suggested. A clever monkey is still a monkey, Yuna said dismissively. Make sure he understands his place. Humans need to learn they cannot rush evolution. They are thousands of years behind us, and no amount of ambition will change that. Later that night, Yuna stood on her private balcony. The 3 moons of the celestial homeworld shone on her beautiful city. She had devoted her life to keeping her people at the top of the galactic order. Lesser species needed to be guided, controlled, and sometimes denied access to technologies they weren't ready for. Humans were particularly troublesome. They advanced too quickly, without the wisdom to use their discoveries properly. They still fought wars among themselves. They still acted on emotion rather than logic. They will learn, she whispered to the night sky. The natural order cannot be defied. As she spoke, a small light appeared in the sky, a ship entering the atmosphere. The Earth delegation was arriving early. Yuna watched it descend toward the spaceport, a tiny spark against the vast, orderly perfection of Nova City. She did not know that the human on that ship would soon challenge everything she believed about the natural order of the galaxy. Ta-Han stepped off the small Earth shuttle and felt the strange gravity of the celestial homeworld. It was slightly stronger than Earth, making his movements feel heavy. The air smelled like cinnamon and metal. He took a deep breath and smiled. After studying celestials for 15 years, he was finally on their planet. No one was waiting to greet him. This was not a surprise. Humans were not important to celestials. A service robot floated toward him. Earth delegate. Follow for processing. Ta picked up his single bag and followed the robot through the massive spaceport. Other aliens, tall, elegant beings with tentacles, floating clouds of gas contained in special suits, blue-skinned merchants with 4 arms, all had celestial guides. Only Ta walked alone behind a basic service robot. I am early, Ta said to the robot. The summit doesn't start for 2 days. Noted, the robot replied without stopping. The spaceport opened into a vast city of crystal and light. Buildings taller than anything on Earth reached into the purple sky. Vehicles moved silently between them on invisible paths. It was beautiful, perfect, and cold. At the security checkpoint, a celestial finally acknowledged Ta's presence. Her name was Ja, according to the badge on her shimmering uniform. She looked at Ta with a polite disgust someone might show a stray animal. Human delegate, extend your hand for DNA verification. Ta did as instructed. Ja touched his wrist with a silver device, careful not to make skin contact. Verified. Dr. Ta-Han of Earth. She handed him a simple gray badge. This grants you access to public areas and Class 5 delegation meetings only. Attempting to enter restricted areas will result in immediate removal from Nova City. Thank you, Ta said with genuine warmth. Your city is breathtaking. The mathematical precision of the architecture is like music made visible. Jia blinked, her luminescent eyes showing brief confusion at his response. Most delegates from lower classes were either intimidated or resentful. This human seemed appreciative. A transport will take you to your quarters, she said, returning to her script. The transport was small and basic, unlike the elegant vehicles Tai had seen carrying other delegates. It took him away from the gleaming central towers to a plain building on the outskirts. Tower 5, Human Section, announced the transport. Exit now. Tay's room was functional but minimal, a sleeping platform, a cleaning unit, and a basic food synthesizer that only produced bland nutrition packets formulated for human biology. The window looked out at a maintenance yard rather than the beautiful city center. Instead of complaining, Tai unpacked his few belongings. Among them was a small plant in a clear container, a bonsai tree, carefully cultivated for years. He placed it near the window where it could get light. A chime sounded, and a message appeared on the wall screen. All Class 5 delegates will attend orientation at sunset. Report to Level 3, Hall D. Tai changed into fresh clothes, simple black pants, and a gray tunic. Previous human delegates had worn elaborate military uniforms with medals and decorations, trying to impress the Celestials. Tai chose simplicity instead. At sunset, he joined 20 other Class 5 delegates, insectoid Clicta with their clicking mandibles, furry Morians who smelled of herbs, and a delegation of Vexians whose translucent skin revealed their inner organs. No one from Classes 1 through 4 was present. A young celestial male named Da conducted the orientation. He spoke slowly and used simple terms, as if addressing children. You will remain in designated areas. You will not approach Celestials unless spoken to first. You may observe open sessions, but not speak unless recognized by the chair. Afterward, as the other delegates departed, Tai approached Da. Excuse me, is the Botanical Garden open to Class 5 delegates? I've read about your remarkable adaptive plant species. Da seemed startled by the question. The gardens. Why would you be interested in our botanical science? I'm a xenobiologist, Tai explained. The relationship between celestial biology and your plant life shows fascinating parallel evolution. Your scientist's paper on symbiotic response was brilliant. Da stared at Ta with new interest. You've read celestial scientific papers. All that are available to humans, Ta confirmed. Though I'm sure there's much more that isn't shared with us. After a moment of consideration, Da touched his wrist device. I've granted you limited access to the outer gardens. Scientific section only, not the ceremonial areas. Thank you, Ta said with a slight bow. Your generosity honors me. As Todd walked through the gardens later that evening, he observed more than just the plants. He noticed how Celestials moved in perfect coordination, never touching. He saw how they communicated with subtle changes in their bioluminescence, hiding their true thoughts behind polite expressions. And he noticed something else. The youngest Celestials stayed separate from the elders, their lights pulsing in patterns the older ones didn't use. A small group of Celestials watched him from a distance, whispering. One broke away and approached. She was tall and elegant with skin that shimmered like opals. You are the human delegate, she said. It wasn't a question. Dr. Tahan, he replied with a respectful nod. And you are? I am Sun, Junior Science Coordinator. She studied him openly. Why are you examining our night blooms? They have no practical value to humans. Beauty has value of its own, Ta said, gesturing to a flower that glowed with gentle blue light. And understanding other species helps me understand the universe better. Sun tilted her head. Most humans demand technology or resources. You want understanding. Not all humans are the same, Ta said. Just as I suspect not all Celestials think alike, despite appearances. Sun's skin flashed briefly with a pattern Tai had never seen in his research. Surprise, perhaps, or warning. Be careful, human, she said quietly. Such observations could be considered inappropriate. As she walked away, Tai turned back to the glowing flowers. His first day on the celestial homeworld had confirmed what he had long suspected. Behind their perfect facade, the Celestials had secrets. And during this summit, those secrets might be the key to changing how they viewed humanity forever. 3 days into the summit, Ta sat in the back of the great meeting hall. The room was arranged in 5 circles. The inner circle held the Celestials and other Class 1 species. Each outer circle contained lower-ranked species. Humans and other Class 5 delegates sat in the outermost ring, farthest from the speakers. Tad listened as High Admiral Yuna spoke about resource distribution in the Orion Arm. Her voice was musical and clear, her arguments logical. But Ta noticed something unusual, a slight tremor in her hand as she pointed to star charts. Then he noticed more. A celestial delegate 2 rows ahead kept touching his neck, where faint blue marks were visible. Another had small crystal-like growths on her wrist, which she kept covering with her sleeve. The meeting ended abruptly when a celestial collapsed. His skin flashed with alarming patterns of light before going dim. Medical units rushed in as delegates were quickly ushered out. "All delegates return to your assigned quarters immediately," announced a voice over the communication system. But Todd didn't go to his quarters. Instead, he followed the medical team at a distance. They took the sick Celestial to a facility near the central tower. Todd noted the location before returning to Tower 5. In the common area, other Class 5 delegates were talking nervously. "Did you see those marks on some of the Celestials?" asked a furry Mordin. "My species can detect illness through smell," said another delegate. "Something is wrong with them." Later that night, the announcement came. Due to a minor health matter, all summit meetings are postponed for 1 day. Remain in your assigned areas. Todd couldn't sleep. The marks he had seen reminded him of something. A silicon-based fungal infection that had affected Mars colonists years ago. It had started with blue discoloration and progressed to crystalline growths. The next morning, Tai requested a meeting with any available Celestial medical officer. His request was denied. He tried again, offering to share information about similar symptoms observed on Earth. Denied again. By midday, rumors spread that dozens of Celestials were sick. The mood in Tower 5 was tense. Lower-class species were always the last to receive information. Tai was in the garden, thinking, when Sun appeared. Her perfect skin now showed several small crystal formations near her hairline. "You should not be here," she said, but her voice lacked its usual authority. "You're sick," Ta said simply. "Many Celestials are, aren't they?" Sun's skin flashed with patterns of distress. "It is a minor matter. Our medical technology will resolve it." "But it hasn't yet," Tai observed. "The crystals are spreading. They're painful, aren't they?" Sun didn't answer directly. "Why are you interested in our temporary difficulty?" "Because I might be able to help. We had something similar affect humans on Mars. Silicon-based fungal growth that crystallizes in the body." "Impossible," Sun said. "Celestial biology is nothing like human biology." "True," Tai agreed. "But fungi don't care about our differences. They adapt to whatever host they find." Sun was silent for a moment. "Our medical systems can find no cause. No treatment is working." She touched the crystals on her face. "They grow larger every hour." "Let me help," Tai offered. "At least let me look at the data." A human doctor helping Celestials. Sun almost laughed. "The High Council would never allow it." "Then don't tell them it's my idea," Ta suggested. "Present the information yourself." After Sun left, Tai returned to his room and began writing everything he knew about the Mars fungus. He included treatment protocols, biological markers, and prevention methods. He sent the document to Sun's communication code. The next morning, a full emergency was declared. No one could leave their quarters. Food was delivered by robots. Through his window, Tai saw medical teams in protective gear moving between towers. His door chimed in the afternoon. When it opened, Director Quan stood there, his perfect face now marred by crystal growths along his jaw. "Dr. Han," he said stiffly, "you will come with me." Quan led Ta to a shuttle, which took them to the central medical facility. Inside, dozens of Celestials lay on beds, their skin displaying distress patterns. The crystals had grown larger on many of them, spreading across faces and limbs. High Admiral Yuna waited in a sterile chamber. Even in illness, she maintained her dignity, though crystals now covered one side of her face. "Human," she said, "an officer named Sun claims you have encountered this condition before." Ta nodded. "Not exactly the same, but very similar. On Mars, 15 years ago. Our medical science is thousands of years ahead of yours," Yuna said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Sometimes old problems need old solutions," Tay replied gently. "Will you show me your research data?" After a moment of consideration, Yuna nodded to Quan, who activated a holographic display. Tai studied the complex celestial medical data. Despite the advanced technology, he could see they were approaching the problem wrong. They were treating it as a virus, but the growth patterns were fungal. You're fighting the wrong enemy, Tai explained. It's not a virus. It's a silicon-based fungal organism that uses crystalline structures to reproduce. Impossible, said a celestial doctor. We scanned for all known fungal patterns. It's not in your database because it's not from your world, Ta suggested. Could it have come in with one of the visiting delegations? The room went silent. Celestials never considered that lesser species could bring diseases they weren't prepared for. What treatment do you propose? Yuna finally asked. Tai outlined the treatment protocol from Mars, a combination of specific sound frequencies that shattered the crystal structures and a compound that prevented the fungus from reforming them. Our synthesizers can create this compound, said the celestial doctor, studying Ta's formula. But we have no experience with using sound as medicine. On Earth, we've used sound healing for thousands of years, Tai explained. Sometimes ancient methods work when new ones fail. Yuna looked at Ta with new intensity. If this works, human, you will have the gratitude of the Celestials. I don't want gratitude, Ta said simply. I just want to help. As the Celestial medical team began implementing his suggestions, Ta noticed Sun watching him from across the room. For the first time, a Celestial was looking at a human with something other than contempt or pity. In her luminescent eyes, Ta saw the beginning of respect. The crisis had just begun, but already the rigid hierarchy of the galaxy was showing its first crack. The medical center buzzed with activity as celestial doctors implemented Ta's treatment plan. They created sound chambers where the specific frequencies he suggested could shatter the crystal structures growing on their skin. The special compound was being made in large quantities by their advanced synthesizers. Ta worked alongside them, ignoring the stares from celestials who had never worked with a human before. His hands moved quickly, adjusting equipment and checking readings. Unlike the celestials who preferred to direct robots to do physical tasks, Ta worked with his own hands. Why do you not use the assistant robots? Sun asked as she watched him calibrate a sound emitter. Sometimes you need to feel something to understand it, Ta explained. Robots can't tell me how the sound vibration feels against different crystal formations. Sun touched the crystals on her face thoughtfully. They had stopped growing, but hadn't yet begun to recede. The first patients entered the sound chambers. The Celestials had modified Ta's original design, making it more efficient. When they emerged an hour later, the smaller crystals had begun to crack and fall away. It's working, Quan announced, examining his own skin where small crystals had begun to break apart. High Admiral Yuna watched from her private treatment room. Bring the human to me, she commanded. Tai entered Yuna's room and bowed respectfully. Her condition was worse than most. The crystals had spread across much of her body. You understand this disease better than our best doctors, she said. How is this possible? Not better, Tai corrected gently, just differently. Your doctors look for perfect solutions. Humans look for working solutions. Explain. Celestials think in straight lines. If it doesn't lead to B, you look for a new A. Humans think in circles and zigzags. We try unusual connections. Yuna considered this. And this different thinking helped you solve our problem. When we had this illness on Mars, our advanced treatments failed too, Tai admitted. It was a janitor who noticed the crystals would crack when he played old music while cleaning the lab. A coincidence that led to discovery. A janitor. Yuna seemed shocked. A menial worker made a medical breakthrough. On Earth, good ideas can come from anyone, Ta said. That's our strength. As days passed, the treatment proved increasingly effective. Most Celestials were recovering, their perfect skin clearing of the crystal growths. But questions remained about where the fungus had come from. Ta spent hours in the Celestial archives, searching for clues. The Celestials had granted him access to their medical history, something no human had seen before. You should rest, Sun said, finding him late one night surrounded by holographic displays of ancient celestial medical texts. Something doesn't make sense, Ta said. This fungus is too perfectly adapted to celestial biology. It's like it was made for you. Sun sat beside him, closer than Celestials normally sat to other species. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not sure yet," Tai admitted, "but I keep finding references to a research project from 5,000 years ago. Something called the Purification." Sun's skin flashed with patterns Tai hadn't seen before. "That is restricted knowledge. How did you access it?" "I didn't," Ta said. "I just found mentions of it in other texts." "What was it?" Sun was quiet for a long moment. "It was a dark time in our history. Celestials were not always as perfect as we are now." Through careful questioning, Ta learned the truth. Long ago, the Celestials had engineered biological weapons to use against rival factions of their own species. After their society unified, they locked away these weapons and tried to forget they ever existed. "This fungus matches the description of one such weapon," Ta said. "Could it have been stored somewhere in this building? Somewhere that was recently opened after being sealed for thousands of years?" Sun's eyes widened. The Heritage Chamber. It was opened for the first time in millennia to prepare for the summit. Ancient artifacts were brought out for display. They took this information to High Admiral Yuna and Director Quan. At first, they refused to believe it. "Impossible," Quan declared. "Those weapons were destroyed." "Were they?" Tai asked gently. "Or were they just hidden and forgotten?" Investigations confirmed Ta's theory. The fungus had been sealed in an ancient container, its purpose long forgotten. When opened for the summit, it released spores that infected the Celestials. "We were attacked by our own past," Yuna said, her voice somber. By the 10th day, the crisis was ending. The treatment had worked for everyone, and protocols were in place to prevent further spread. Ta had worked day and night alongside the Celestial doctors, earning their grudging respect. In a private meeting room, High Admiral Yuna sat with her council and Ta. "You have done what our best minds could not," she admitted. "Why? You could have let us suffer. Many species would have enjoyed seeing the mighty Celestials brought low." "That's not who humans are," Ta said simply. "Or at least, not who we try to be. We want to help, to connect, to understand. These qualities we dismissed as primitive. Empathy, intuition, emotional thinking. They have value we did not recognize," Yuna acknowledged. Ta smiled. "Different is not lesser. Your technology is amazing. Your intelligence is impressive. But sometimes a different perspective is what's needed. The class system has served us for millennia," Director Quan said. "Are you suggesting we abandon it?" "I'm suggesting you reconsider it," Tai replied. "Judge species by what they contribute, not by how similar they are to you." As Ta left the meeting, Sun waited outside. Her skin was perfect again, all traces of the crystals gone. "The council is talking about creating a special position for you," she said. "No human has ever held an advisory role before." "I don't want special treatment," Ta said. "What I want is for all humans to be seen for what we truly are." "And what is that?" Sun asked. "Not perfect," Tai admitted, "but perfectly human. And that's enough." The final day of the summit arrived. The great meeting hall looked the same as before, with its 5 circles of seats, but something had changed. When Tai entered, he was not directed to the outer ring. Instead, a celestial guide named June led him to his seat in the 2nd circle. "There must be a mistake," Ta said, looking at the seat among Class 2 delegates. "No mistake," Jun replied. "High Admiral Yuna's orders." As delegates filled the hall, many stared at Ta. A human had never sat in the inner circles before. Some delegates whispered, others seemed angry. The Celestials, however, showed no reaction at all. Their faces remained calm, though their skin pulsed with subtle light patterns. High Admiral Yuna entered last. Her skin glowed with perfect health again. No trace remained of the crystal disease. She stood at the center of the hall, her voice carrying without effort. "The summit will now resume," she announced. "Before we continue our planned discussions, the High Council has an important announcement." The hall went silent. Celestial announcements were rare and always significant. For 10,000 years, the Celestials have maintained the class system of species categorization, Una said. This system has served as the foundation for galactic order. Today, we announce its revision. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ta felt every eye turn to him. Recent events have revealed flaws in our thinking, Una continued. We judged species by their similarity to ourselves, not by their unique qualities or contributions. Director Quan stepped forward, activating a holographic display. The new system will recognize different evolutionary paths as equally valid. Technical advancement remains important, but other factors will now be considered: problem-solving approaches, cultural development, and adaptability. A Rigel delegate stood up. Are you saying Class 5 species will now be equal to us? We are saying the very concept of ranking species must change, Una replied. The universe is not a ladder with celestials at the top. It is a web where different abilities serve different purposes. The announcement caused both excitement and concern. Some delegates argued loudly. Others agreed eagerly. Through it all, Tay remained quiet, watching the celestials closely. Their perfect faces showed no emotion, but their skin patterns revealed their uncertainty. This change challenged thousands of years of celestial belief. After the general session ended, Tai was invited to a private ceremony in the Celestial Council chamber. Few non-celestials had ever entered this sacred space. The walls were crystal, and the ceiling opened to the purple sky above. The 7 members of the High Council stood in a circle. Una addressed Ta. Dr. Ta Han of Earth, the celestial people acknowledge your contribution to our well-being and our understanding. We offer you the Order of the 3 Moons, our highest honor for a non-celestial. Sun stepped forward, holding a beautiful crystal pendant that glowed with inner light. I am honored, Ta said, bowing deeply. But I cannot accept this as an individual. The celestials looked confused. Turning down an honor was unheard of. My actions represent humanity's potential, not just my own, Tai explained. If you honor me, you honor only one human. If you honor humanity, you recognize what all of us can offer. Una considered this. You would reject our greatest gift. I would ask that it be given differently, Ta said. Not to me, but to the Earth delegation, and not for what I did, but for what humans are. After a moment, Una nodded. Your humility is unexpected. Perhaps this too is a human quality we have undervalued. Later, Ta walked through the gardens with Sun. The summit would end tomorrow, and delegates were already preparing to leave. You will return to Earth, Sun said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Ta replied. My work here is done. You could stay, Sun suggested. The Council has created a new position, Interspecies Cultural Advisor. It was meant for you. Ta smiled. Again, you honor me too much. Other humans could fill that role, perhaps better than I could. You are not like other humans, Sun insisted. That's where you're still wrong, Ta said gently. I am exactly like other humans in the ways that matter. We are all different. We are all flawed. And we all have something to offer. Sun's skin pulsed with a new pattern, one Ta had never seen in any celestial research. What does that light pattern mean? He asked. For the first time, Sun looked embarrassed. It is not one we typically show to other species. It indicates personal connection. Ta nodded, understanding what she couldn't quite say. Celestials feel emotions too, don't they? You just hide them better than we do. We control them, Sun corrected. Or we try to. Your visit has complicated things. At the spaceport the next day, Tai prepared to board the Earth shuttle. To his surprise, a large group of Celestials had gathered to see him off, including Una, Quan, and Sun. The human delegates will receive the Order of 3 Moons at a special ceremony on Earth next month, Una announced. I will present it personally. A celestial high admiral visiting Earth. Tai was shocked. That has never happened before. Many things are happening for the first time, Una replied. Her perfect face showed the smallest hint of a smile. As Todd boarded his shuttle, Sun approached with a small package. "A personal gift," she said quietly. "Not from the Celestials to humanity, but from me to you." Inside was a crystal containing a perfectly preserved celestial garden flower, the one Ta had admired on his first day. "To remind you that beauty exists in many forms," Sun said. The shuttle doors closed, and Ta watched through the window as the Celestials grew smaller. Their beautiful, perfect forms standing straight and dignified, but their skin now pulsing with light patterns that spoke of emotions they were just beginning to acknowledge. As the shuttle broke atmosphere, Todd looked down at the celestial world, no longer a place where humans were considered inferior, but a place where a new understanding had begun.